Hi there, my name is Oliver. Tonight I will be reading chapters 5 and 6 of The Sleeping Dragon, book 1 of the trilogy Guardians of the Flame, The Warriors. When we last left off, our party of unwilling adventurers were exploring their surroundings and attempting to learn more of this strange new world. What will Walter/Hakim and Jason/Einar find when they reach the walled city? Let's find out. Chapter 5 Lundale. The day is for honest men, the night for thieves. Euripides. Lightfingers sidestepped a rut on the dusty road. How do you want to play it? Hakim smiled. The first thing we do, he said, is find ourselves a tavern and get ourselves a drink. He cocked his head to one side. Unless, of course, we can find ourselves a willing tavern girl. They were half a mile from the city, the walls looming dark and massive ahead of them. Lightfingers found it strange, actually, that there was still spring in Hakim's walk. The hike down the hill and along the road hadn't made an impact on the younger man. Lightfingers raised his hand. Hold it a moment. Got to catch my breath. He forced a chuckle. Besides, since when have you been willing to share? We? Not that anything interested him after that walk except a place to sit down and something to drink. Preferably something cool. Hakim clapped him on the back. That's the spirit, Jason, my friend. We may be down here on business, but I didn't hear the dwarf say we couldn't have fun, too. How much do you have on you? He shrugged. I don't know exactly. 1 platinum piece, 5 gold, 8 silver, 6 copper. Something like that. Pretty good for not knowing exactly, Jason. Call me Lightfingers. He rubbed at his stump. Jason Parker was a young man with a full complement of limbs. Was. Lightfingers, then. Look, Doc apparently went to one hell of a lot of trouble to get us here and get us supplied. I doubt that he would have outfitted us with money that wasn't good. At least at bullion rates. Whatever they are. Right. A creaking from ahead sped them around the bend. A stocky peasant, dragging a creaking handcart, smiled a greeting through gapped teeth. He stopped to run the blunt fingers of one hand through his greasy blonde hair, while he balanced the cart with his other. Greetings, friends, he said in Narendra, his vowels overlong to Lightfinger's ears. Bound for Lundale? Lightfinger walked over and brushed an imaginary speck of dirt from the peasant's shoulder. His jerkin was similar to Lightfinger's, but cut more broadly. Yes, we are. There, that looks better, friend. And how is the trading today? The peasant patted his pouch, then waved a hand at the muslin sacks on his cart. Good. He lowered the cart, letting it balance on the 2 struts that depended from the handles. In fact, he rummaged around in the cart, producing a bulging wine sack. Good enough that Wennel of Lundiskarn would share a drink with 2 strangers. For luck. He uncorked the bag and drank deeply, 2 trickles of purple running from the corners of his mouth and into his beard. If you would honor me. Delighted. Hakim elbowed Lightfingers aside, accepted the wine sack, and tilted it back. Good. Very good. He wiped his mouth on the back of an arm, handing the sack to Lightfingers. Lightfingers drank. Hakim was right. The wine was good. The dark, lukewarm liquid washed the dust from his mouth, replacing it with a tingling, rippling effervescence that burbled down his throat, setting up warm vibrations in his middle. Lightfingers propped the bottom of the wine sack on his stump and considered taking another swallow. No, it wouldn't do to seem too greedy. Better to be greedy. He handed the wine back to Wennel. I thank you. The peasant frowned. An unsummoned memory welled up. A drink for luck was a ritual that had to be accompanied by an introduction. Einar, one-handed, thanks you. Wennel smiled, his forehead wrinkling as he turned to Hakim. And Hakim Singh thanks you as well. Wennel's puzzled smile didn't change. I can see that friend Einar is of Osgrad, but you are from Secaucus. Wennel nodded knowledgeably. Ah, and that land is to the... He snapped his fingers, as though the direction were on the tip of his tongue. West, Hakim supplied. Far to the west. The peasant's eyes widened. Beyond the bitter sea? Far beyond. Beyond fabled Detareth, even? Hakim shot Lightfingers a quick glance. Detareth had been the jumping-off point of the last game. The last one before this one. No, this wasn't a game. Yes, beyond even Detareth. Wennell nodded wisely. Oh, yes, I have heard of Sea Caucus. It's just escaped me for a moment. He shrugged, dismissing the subject. Do you need a place to stay in Lundale? At Lightfinger's nod, the peasant brightened. Good. If I may, let me suggest the tavern of Fran of Pandathaway, on the street of Two Dogs. It is just beyond the public well. Tell Fran that you are friends of Wennell, and I am sure he will give you a special rate, a good one. Wennell turned to put the wine sack back in his cart. Permit me. Lightfingers stepped up and stumbled slightly to distract the peasant while he opened and emptied Wennell's pouch, then flicked his haul into his sleeve before taking the sack. He tucked the wine sack under a blanket in the cart, to keep it out of the sun and cool. Lightfingers raised his good hand to his forehead. And a good day to you, friend Wennell. The peasant nodded, picked up the handles of his cart, and started down the road. And a good evening to you, friends. You should hurry if you wish to reach Lundale before sundown. We will. Lightfingers tugged at Hakim's arm. Let's hurry, friend Hakim. In a few moments, Wennell and his cart were out of sight. Lightfingers emptied his sleeve pocket into his hand. Look at these. Where did you stupid son of a... Look at them. Hakim held the scattering of coins in cupped hands. They were just like the ones they had in their own pouches, roughly circular, covered with a rippling pattern on one side, like a stylized representation of waves, the other side decorated with a poorly stamped bust of a bearded man. He couldn't read the writing. Damn, I should have had Doria read it to me before we left. See, Lightfinger said. That solves the money problem. This is local coin, but look at the amount. Wennell said he did well, but there's a full dozen coppers to 1 silver coin, which means that we're rich. Hakim's face darkened. No, that means that you're disobeying orders. Ahira said no stealing. He shrugged. Put them in your pouch. Hakim hesitated. Unless you want to run after the peasant and tell him you're sorry we robbed him. Look, didn't the dwarf say that we're supposed to gather information? Well, yes. And isn't the fact that we have legitimate money important information? Well, isn't it? Yes, but... Lightfingers spat on the ground. Don't be more of a fool than you have to be. He tried to steal from us. Stay at Fran's Inn? He's probably getting a kickback from the innkeeper, who'd know to charge us extra. As Hakim tucked the coins in his pouch, Lightfingers kept a smile from his face. The bigger thief, wasn't thinking. Why would Lightfingers have him hold his haul? No reason, unless Lightfingers intended to add to his take. Add enough to it that it would make a paltry dozen coppers and 1 silver coin seem too small to bother with. If only I'd known just how well off we were, I wouldn't have bothered to come along. Just lift all the money in their pouches and run. Which is what I'll do when we get back. Won't let that opportunity escape me again. Einar? Concern creased the big man's face. Are you all right? Never mind. Just thinking about something. He waved a hand at the guard squatting at the latticework gate ahead of them. Let's get him on his feet and get some directions. He raised his voice and switched to Arendra. You, how do we get to the Street of Two Dogs? Lightfingers smiled at Hakim. After all, we don't have to tell him that Wennell sent us, huh? Fran of Pandathaway mopped at his gleaming pate and seated himself across the table from them. I thank you, he said, tossing back a quart-sized mug of the sour beer that already had Lightfinger's head buzzing. And would you care to ply me with more beer before you start to extract information from me? Not that it will do any good. He gestured at the scraggly occupants of the low-ceilinged room. There's little enough wealth here, not enough to interest a pair of thieves. Fran raised a bushy eyebrow. That appeared to be the only hair on the beefy man's body. His mottled forearms and huge hands were as naked and hairless as his head. The tavern was dark and dank. the gloom hardly alleviated by a dozen oil lamps sputtering out clouds of smoke where they hung from the overhead beams. The low, rough-hewn tables were littered with pools of spilled beer and gobbets of meat. Lightfingers sipped his beer. Hardly a well-kept place, this was. But even at this early hour, Fran's tavern was crowded. Several scores of men gathered around the tables, shouting at the 3 harried barmaids to bring them more beer. Hakim smiled broadly. "And what makes you accuse us of being thieves? As we told you, we are men-at-arms." He dropped a hand to the hilt of his scimitar. "If you have any doubts, I'd be happy to demonstrate. Quite happy." As Lightfingers set his mug down and reached his hand into his jerkin to loosen his dagger in its sheath, Fran chuckled deeply, raising both palms in mock surrender. "As you say." Shaking his head, he pinched a passing barmaid, the bedraggled girl rewarding him with a squeal and a scowl. "More beer, or I'll feed you to the hogs." He turned back to Lightfingers and Hakim. "As long as you don't annoy my customers, it's of no interest to me whether you're soldiers or thieves, or whores in disguise, for that matter." Hakim returned his smile. "A rather good disguise." "Indeed." Fran accepted the fresh tankard and took a healthy swig, before setting it down and folding his hands on the table in front of him. "And now, my 2 well-disguised trollops, what is it that you want to know?" Lightfingers considered it for a moment. This interrogation of the innkeeper was a waste of time, but it couldn't be helped. He had to stay in Hakim's good graces until they got back to the hill. And for now, that meant getting information out of Fran. If the innkeeper knew anything. "Let us suppose something," Lightfingers said, idly running a fingertip through a puddle of beer on the tabletop. "Let us suppose that my friend and I were thieves." He stared sternly at Fran. "Untrue as that is, of course." Fran pursed his mouth. "Why not? And?" "And let us suppose that we 2 thieves were newly arrived from the west, from the far west, looking for something worth stealing, say." "Then you would probably pay well for information, I suppose." Lightfingers produced a silver coin, spun it on the table in front of him. "Possibly so." As Fran reached for it, he slapped his hand over the coin. "Possibly we would pay for such information after we had received it." Lightfingers left the coin on the table as he sipped his beer. "Remember, we are supposing that my friend and I are thieves, not fools." "Well put." The innkeeper rested his many chins on his fists. "Then I would say this. Take passage from Lundale. We are poor here." Fran shook his head sadly. "It's all I can do to make ends meet, keep the Lord's men from booting me out into the street. Now, if I were a younger man, I'd go back to Pandathaway." He scowled, then sighed. "There is much worth having there. I remember once, back home, a dwarf paid for a night's lodging with a diamond. It was the size of my thumbnail." He stared at his dirty, split thumbnail. "I swear it was." Lightfingers didn't ask why Fran had left Pandathaway. In the second place, the innkeeper probably wouldn't tell him. Possibly he had been chased out, exiled, or left just a few moments ahead of the authorities. But in the first place, Lightfingers really didn't care. "And how would you suggest we get to Pandathaway?" Fran shrugged. "The usual way. Book passage at Lundaport." He smiled. "I know a captain who might give you a good rate for deck passage." "Like you gave us here? I don't see the need." Hakim elbowed him in the side. All this talk of stealing was not what the big man was interested in. "Perhaps there would be something else. Some other... quiet." Lightfingers shook his head. "I find what our host is saying to be most interesting." Fran smiled knowledgeably. "What are you really looking for?" "Actually," Hakim said, quashing Lightfinger's objection with a glare, "we've heard of something called the Gate Between Worlds." "Then you're not thieves. You are fools." Fran spread his hands. "Even if it exists, then it would seem a waste of—" He interrupted himself with a shrug. "But it's none of my concern." He turned to Lightfingers, palm up. "But I would be happy to tell you." He accepted the coin, beckoned to a barmaid, and tucked it into her cleavage. "What everyone else knows, that it's said to be east of Pandathway, somewhere past Eric." The innkeeper set his palms on the table and levered himself to his feet. "And I will add this for free. If you have any talent, you would be wise to stay in Pandathway. Steal from the dwarves, from the elven. The risk is great, but so are the rewards, if you're good enough." He turned away, muttering, "The size of my thumbnail it was." Lightfingers drained his tankard and shook his head. "A genius. That's what you are. A genius." "What did I do?" "You told him the truth, stupid. Look, as long as we didn't seem too eager, I could have kept him talking, probably all night. A silver piece is worth a lot here. Haven't you been listening? Hell, we could buy this place, serving girls and all, for what we've got in our pouches." Hakim shrugged his bare shoulders. The big man was completely unaffected. By Lightfinger's scorn, by the hike down, by the chill drafts blowing through the tavern, by the quarts of beer he had consumed. "As you pointed out, money isn't a problem for us." His expression grew grave. "And no more stealing, by the way. Understood? There's nothing worth taking here, and we don't need any trouble with the locals. How'd you like to try climbing those walls?" Lightfingers rubbed his stump against the edge of the table. "Wouldn't be hard. They've got a walkway around the top, and staircases leading up to it. The walls are intended to keep people out, not in. It would be tough to get over them from the outside, and I could have done that barehanded before I lost my... Jason." Hakim's face creased with concern. "What the hell are you thinking of? You sound as if you think that I'm Einar Lightfingers." He sneered. "Who do I look like? And who do I have one hand like?" He slammed his stump down on the table. "For all I know, this Jason Parker was only a dream. Here is real." He waved his stump under Hakim's nose. "This is real." He pushed himself to his feet, wobbling. The beer, that was the trouble. He had had enough to get angry on, but not enough to relax on. Yes, that was it. Time for some more, to smooth things out. The room canted off to the left. He snatched his tankard from the table and veered right toward a stoppered keg in the corner. He was halfway there when the huge oak door swung open, and 3 men stepped into the tavern. 2 were soldiers, tall and muscular in chain armor, swords belted to their waists, each leaning a short, stabbing spear against the wall. The 3rd man, though, made Lightfinger's palm itch. Man? Maybe boy was more accurate. He looked to be about 16, blond, with sunken dark eyes and a narrow face. His soft purple cape, the many-jeweled ring on the thumb of his ungloved right hand, the bulging pouch at his waist, all of it screamed wealth. Fran bustled over as the background chatter died, the new stillness almost painful. "Lord Lund, I am honored." With a crooked smile, the boy removed his other glove and slapped it lightly across the innkeeper's face, his men-at-arms smiling at his side. "Not lord, not yet. Just lordling, until my blessed father dies." He cocked his head to one side and laid a hand on the larger soldier's arm. "Marek, I believe that this fat beer seller has just insulted my father." "My apologies, lordling," Fran sputtered, his fingers knotting at his waist. "I meant no insult to your noble father. May he live forever." "Oh? Then you think me incompetent to rule Lundale?" "No, not at all. I mean, what may I bring you?" The innkeeper clumsily dodged the paradox. Clearly, the lordling would choose to take offense at whatever Fran said. He gestured 4 men away from a nearby table and wiped at its top, then his own face. "Beer? Wine?" He held a chair for the boy. Lund stood silent for a moment, then shrugged. "Let's let it pass, for once." He sat. "And you, innkeeper, will bring us nothing." He jerked a finger at the least bedraggled of the serving girls. "Wine. Your best, which, I suspect, is none too good. Oh, and clean glasses, if you please." The barmaid scurried off toward the back. Lightfingers kept his face blank as he filled his tankard, then returned to his table. He sipped his beer slowly as the level of noise in the room began to pick up, returning to only a fraction of its previous level. Everyone in the room was patently terrified of the slumming lordling, which was an advantage of sorts. It might make it... "Don't even think about it," Hakim hissed. Lightfingers smiled, taking a deep draught of the sour beer. The taste actually got better after a while. "Easy, my friend. I wouldn't. Unless the opportunity presents itself. Then I wouldn't bother going back to the hill with you. I'd just book myself a passage to Pandathaway and spend my time picking up diamonds the size of an innkeeper's thumbnail." "Wouldn't think of it." "Good." Hakim sat back. "I think it would be a good idea if we get out of here quietly. Make our way back to our room. It's a bit stuffy there, but I don't like... You!" The smaller of the two soldiers stood in front of them, glaring down at Lightfingers. "Didn't you see me beckon to you?" "No, I..." "Very well." The soldier tugged at his forelock in a sarcastic genuflection. "Lordling Lund requests the great honor of your company at his table. He likes to drink with the common people, if you will come this way." Lightfingers called up an expression of terror. "Speaking of opportunity..." "My pleasure, sir." He stood slowly and walked shakily over to where the boy sat, a cruel smile flickering across his thin lips. "Be seated." He nodded at a chair. "And you are?" "Einar. Einar One Hand, lordling." Lightfingers was too obviously the name of a thief. A clay wine bottle and 4 glasses arrived, the barmaid setting them in front of the boy, then scurrying away, her smile unchanging, as though it had been painted on. "Allow me," the boy said, pulling the cork, then pouring wine in 2 of the mottled glasses. "My friends don't like to drink while they are working." He raised a glass to his lips and took a sip. Lund frowned. "Too tannic." He lowered his glass and smiled. "I hope you won't be offended by their abstinence." "Oh no, lordling. I follow the same custom." Lund picked up his glass again and drank deeply, the overflow of the purple liquid running down his chin and onto his tunic. That was good. Either the boy was normally a slob, or he was more than a little drunk. "Please drink, Einar One Hand. After all, you are paying for the wine, are you not?" The 2 soldiers looked at each other, smiling knowingly. Obviously, this was not Lund's first stop on a night of slumming, drinking with the common folk, then forcing them to pay for his wine. "Of course. I am honored." Lightfingers drained his own glass, then let his hand fall into his lap. It should be easy, actually. The purse dangled from the near side of Lund's belt, hanging next to Lightfingers as though it were a ripe fruit, begging to be picked. He reached out his hand. "Would you be kind enough to pour me another glass?" Lund rapped his wine glass against the table. "It seems that I am a bit uncoordinated this evening." Lightfingers kept his scowl off his face. "Delighted, lordling." He poured, then set the bottle down. A bit of distraction seemed called for. He brought his stump up to the table as he let his hand drop to his side. The boy recoiled. I understand your name now. How did you lose it?" "Easy now." Lightfingers dipped 2 fingers into the mouth of the boy's pouch and pried them apart, gently, slowly. "Easy. An accident. It was crushed in a mill." Inside the pouch was a jumble of coins. He grasped one between his fingers and eased it out. It was platinum, thick and heavy. Lightfingers finger-flipped it into his sleeve pouch, then took another, careful to be slow enough, smooth enough to prevent it from clinking against the others. "Long ago?" "Many years, lordling. Many years." He took another, then another, slipping them carefully into his sleeve pocket. "That's enough for now. No sense in being too greedy, Jason." "Jason? I'm Jason. Then what?" His hand slipped. Its full weight came to rest on the pouch, and tugged firmly on the boy's belt. Lund's eyes shot downward. "My pouch!" He snatched at Lightfinger's wrist, his glass clattering on the table. Rough hands grasped Lightfinger's shoulders. A sharp blow to the back of his neck sent the world spinning. "Merrick, grab his friend, too." Lund rasped. He opened his eyes. Hakim was in the doorway, his scimitar in his hand, off balance as though he had decided to run, then changed his mind. He snatched a knife from his belt, sent it spinning towards the soldier holding light fingers. The knife clanked against chainmail, then clattered harmlessly, uselessly to the floor. "Don't be a fool! Run!" He put all his strength into a scream. "Now!" The big man hesitated. The smaller soldier picked up the knife and flung it at him. With a meaty thunk, it sank into Hakim's shoulder. Dripping blood, he staggered through the doorway and into the night. "Get him, Marek!" The soldier, sword in hand, ran after him. The other wrestled Lightfingers to his feet. Lordling Lund stood easily in front of him, hefting a spear. "We will deal with your friend, I promise." He twirled it, the foot-long steel head catching and shattering the light of an overhead lamp. "But you won't see that, will you?" He touched the spear point to Lightfinger's tunic. His arms were held behind him, no way to reach his dagger. Not that it would do a lot of good. "Lordling, let me explain, please." "What can I say? But I've got to say something, talk my way out. It can't end like this." The boy hesitated, then nodded. "Of course." "You misunderstood me. An explosion of pain burned through his belly. He screamed. Bloody vomit choked his throat, spewed out of his mouth and down the front of his tunic. He looked down. Half of the spearhead was sunk into his midsection. Lund pulled the spear out and considered its bloody head. A gut wound. I always liked gut wounds. He was a long time dying. He only stopped screaming toward the end. Chapter 6. Second Blood. A soldier, full of strange oaths and bearded like the pard, jealous in honor, sudden and quick in quarrel, seeking the bubble reputation, even in the cannon's mouth. William Shakespeare. Barak came awake at a touch, flinging away the blankets, reaching for his sword. "Easy." Ahira's voice was a harsh whisper. "It's only me." He set the sword back on the grass and tightened his cotton loincloth around his hips. That had been enough to sleep in on a warm night. He looked around. Within the circle of wooden boxes, everyone else was asleep, sprawled out under their blankets like a collection of corpses, except for Andy, who was huddled under hers in a fetal position, shivering in her sleep. Barak shrugged. It was her own fault. Not only had she turned down his suggestion that they share each other's warmth, but she had stubbornly ignored his reminder to make certain she kept at least 2/3 of her covering underneath her. The ground stole a body's warmth more readily than even the chilliest air. Rubbing his eyes, he glared up at the dwarf, not able to make out his expression in the dim starlight. "My turn to go on watch? Already?" "No." Ahira beckoned him to his feet. "Look down the hill, down towards the city." Barak drew air into his lungs and stared off into the distance. Nothing. A few lights twinkling in the city, stars shimmering over the sea, but that was all. "Wonderful. Our leader is jumping its shadows." "So? You don't see anything on the road?" Below them, the road was a black ribbon on a black background. "Don't be silly. You do?" I thought I saw a shape, like somebody fallen. There it is. Can't you see it? It's glowing like a..." "Glowing?" He stared. Nothing. "Oh. I don't see in the infrared, remember?" "Sorry. Wait." The dwarf pointed. "But you can see that, can't you?" Barak followed the other's gesture. Farther down the road, lanterns twinkled like fireflies. 4 of them. They were too far off, too dim for Barak to make out the shapes holding them. But, "I do see the lanterns. But why are they out?" "Oh my god. The shape on the road. It's Hakim." The dwarf spun around. "Everybody up, now!" Barak stooped to pick up his scabbarded sword. Best to keep it in the dark sheath, lest its bright steel reflect the light, announcing his presence. He cast a longing look at his leather armor, heaped next to his blankets on the grass. "I'd better take it." "Like hell you will. No time." "No, I didn't mean the armor. I meant I'll get him. Bring him back. Your legs are too short to run fast." 4 of them, eh? He would have to take out 2 quickly, before they became aware of his presence. and even 2-on-1 would be a chancy shot. "Get your crossbow. Follow me." Ahira's face was still unreadable. He hesitated, then, "Go." Barak sprinted away. Behind him, Ahira called to the others, "Get up, damn you all!" Barak reached Hakim when the soldiers were still a few hundred yards away, the flicker of their lanterns announcing their coming. "Walter." He reached out a hand and felt at the thief's neck. Good, there was a pulse. He slipped his hand down, his fingers coming away sticky. There was a knife in the thief's shoulder, dripping blood. He rubbed his hand on his thigh. Where the hell was Lightfingers? No time to worry about that now. He could try to move Hakim off the road, but that might be too dangerous. There could be other wounds. Moving him might kill him. He smiled. Besides, there was some business to take care of first. Slipping silently into the bushes beside the road, he loosened his sword in its sheath. "Well, Carl, now we find out if you have it." Carl? No, Barak. Carl Cullinane hadn't raised a hand in anger since the 3rd grade. Carl wouldn't squash a spider. He'd lift it on a piece of paper and fling it out the window instead. Carl was a peasant. Barak a warrior. So it had to be Barak, not Carl. And to a warrior, everything is a challenge, or a reward. But he had to decide what the challenge was. Merely chasing them away wouldn't do. Perhaps they could dig up reinforcements. He had to take out 4 soldiers. No euphemisms. Kill them. And he had to do it without getting hurt himself. Doria had none too many healing spells left. Walter might need all of them. "Arnaud, I think I see him," the closest of the soldiers said in curiously accented Arendra, then broke into a trot. Chainmail and a short sword, plus his lantern. Barak could save him for later. But the lantern, dangling from a pole, that had to go quickly, before anyone spotted him crouching in the bushes. Barak felt around the ground. His fingers located a jagged rock, half the size of his fist. He hefted it experimentally, and threw. The lantern shattered, drenching the soldier in flames. He dropped his sword and screamed, his skin crackling. The screams were like a signal to the other 3. They dropped their lantern poles, the nearest 2 drawing their swords. The other, probably the leader, bringing up his crossbow. Its tip weaved, uncertainly. The wind brought a stench of burning flesh to Barak's nostrils. He slipped his sword from its scabbard, keeping the blade low, next to the ground. "Where?" "I don't see." "It's the thief. He's shamming." The leader's crossbow leveled itself at Hakim's crumpled form. Barak gripped his sword and charged out of the bushes, directly at the leader, a growl forcing itself from his throat. The crossbow wavered as Barak closed, breaking stride to kick one of the swordsmen sprawling, ducking under the other's wild swing. "Too bad. You want to live too much." The leader's drill was obvious. Kill one enemy, ignore the other one charging you. He smacked the flat of his sword against the side of the crossbow, sending it spinning away in the dark, the bolt discharging harmlessly to his left. The leader's eyes grew wide. He reached for his sword as Barak's backswing caught him at the base of the neck, the sword tip cleaving his throat effortlessly, dark blood fountaining. The heavy-set man clapped both hands to his throat, trying to hold the wound closed, his cry of pain only a gurgle as a dark torrent poured through his fingers. Barak spun around, leaving him at his back. No time to finish him off, not yet. When it's 1 on many, you can't worry about killing a disabled enemy when there are still unhurt ones around. The one he had kicked away was gone, vanished in the dark, his sword lying still on the ground. "Where is he?" "Never mind. Worry about him when you've killed the other." The small, dark man in front of him smiled, crouching, his sword in his right hand, a long, curved dagger in his left. "Many thanks for the promotion, friend," he said in Arendra, stepping lightly forward, his sword weaving like an eager cobra. "I never liked Arnaud anyway." No time for chatter. There was still 1 man unaccounted for. Barak slashed, the blade of his sword parallel to the ground. The soldier slid to one side, easily deflecting Barak's sword with the flat of his dagger. Before Barak could bring his sword back into line to parry, the slim rapier had nicked at his biceps. It stung terribly. "Not used to 2 swords, eh?" He lunged in full extension, and gasped down at his right wrist, almost severed by Barak's blade. The sword dropped to the dirt. Barak smiled down at the crumpling figure. "Then again, maybe An arm closed on his throat, dragging him off balance. At the edge of his vision, a gleaming dagger rose and started to fall.
Time seemed to slow.
You stupid idiot. You know better than to chat while a fight's going on.
He released his grip on the sword, bringing his hands up to block the downward thrust, knowing that he'd never make it in time. It just wasn't possible. The knife only had to travel a few inches to reach his throat, but his hands would have to seize the wrist, stop the downward movement. Both hands met at the soldier's flaccid arm, as the other arm loosened at his throat. He grabbed, twisted, brought an elbow back into his enemy's midsection, and spun around.
No need.
Ahira's voice rasped from behind. Barak looked at the soldier. A crossbow bolt transfixed the man's head from temple to temple, its dark iron head bent, crumpled. The dead soldier stared up at him, his eyes wide in reproach. Twang! Barak turned to see Ahira standing over Walter, drawing the string of his crossbow back, slipping in another bolt and sending it whistling into the leader.
Never worry about conserving bolts. Better to make sure that they stay dead.
The dwarf sent another bolt into the smoldering body of the first soldier, the one whose lamp Barak had shattered, then looked up, a crooked grin on his broad face.
Not bad, Barak. Not too bad at all.
He frowned.
Except for that stupid bit of bravado. But never mind. Just do it better next time. Right now we've got to get these bodies hidden. Have Doria heal Hakim. And you, come to think of it. Don't want your arm getting infected. Then get ourselves packed up and out of here. There's probably going to be hell to pay. Hey, what's wrong?
Carl Cullinane was on his hands and knees in the dusty road, the stench of burning flesh in his nostrils, vomiting like a fiend. Squinting in the dawn light, Ahira tugged at the cords lashing his two rucksacks together, then shook his head. It would tend to keep him off balance, having two packs on his back, but that couldn't be helped. Somebody had to carry the extra, either that or leave behind supplies that might be needed.
Hakim.
The thief stopped fiddling with his pack and lifted his head.
What is it?
Ahira held out a hand.
Toss me one of your knives. If I have to, I want to be able to cut these loose.
Fine. Hakim flipped a knife point first into the ground at Ahira's feet, then turned back to his work. Ahira opened his mouth, then closed it. Ever since Doria had healed Hakim, he had been distant, quiet, not himself, not at all. Best to leave him alone, at least for a while. What had happened in Lundale must have been bad. Climbing down a sheer wall with a knife in his shoulder, running flat out for 5 miles with soldiers after him, wanting his blood.
He'll get over it. He's always been strong.
Doria gave her rucksack a final pat, then raised an eyebrow in an unvoiced question. There would be a bit of time until the others were ready to leave. Ahira had assigned loads based on physical strength, and the only one with less to carry than Doria was Aristobulus. Less to carry, less time to pack. He gave her a nod and the warmest smile he could come up with.
Go ahead.
Even if she was almost out of healing spells, maybe she could do some good. As Doria crouched beside Hakim, Ahira beckoned the others to him.
You almost ready?
Ahira kept his voice low. No need to distract Doria or Hakim. Andrea nodded. She was keeping her distance from Barak. That was strange, considering the way she'd behaved the previous morning. Then she had clung to him like a leech. Just a couple more minutes. Barak frowned, rubbing fingertips against the blood-stained tear on the arm of his jerkin. The blood had dried, and Doria had healed the wound, so it couldn't be hurting him.
Then again, not all wounds are to the body.
Barak shrugged.
I'll be done shortly. I can take more if necessary. No need to have the rest put out a lot of effort carrying what I can haul easily.
He flexed his shoulders, threatening to split the seams of his jerkin. Ahira smiled. Barak was getting damn cocky after the way he'd almost gotten himself killed. Then again, that was better than his Carl self exercising his guts about a few local soldiers who had been trying to kill Hakim and him when they died.
You too, Ari? Good. Just as soon as Doria's done talking to Hakim, we head down to Lundaport and see if we can book passage to Pandathaway.
He stooped to pick up Hakim's knife and stuck it diagonally under his belt, the cutting edge up. Then bent carefully at the waist to make certain it was secure and that it wouldn't cut him. A quick check on the straps binding his battle axe to his chest showed that they were tight, too, although it would take only 2 quick tugs to undo the loops and free the axe. Pandathaway. Andrea's forehead wrinkled. God, that sounds familiar. She turned to Barak. Doesn't it, Carl? He shook his head. No, first I've heard of it. Maybe you overheard something when Hakim was telling Ahira what happened down there. He glared down at the dwarf. Not that he's seen fit to share it with the rest of us. The warrior had all the sensitivity of a stone. He didn't want to have a bunch of people around, Ahira said, not bothering to keep the scorn out of his voice. How would you feel if you'd been cut up like he was? Listen.
Carl, Andrea took a careful step closer to him. Didn't you tell me once, quite a while back, about another character of yours? Something of Pan something?
Barak nodded, quizzically, stroking at his beard just the way Carl Cullinane used to stroke at the stubble on his face. Sure, Lucius of Pandathaway. Pandathaway! His face lit up. He dropped his sword, and grabbed her by the arms, whirling her around. Pandathaway! Of course! I know where we are. Put me down! As he did, she rubbed at her shoulders, arms crossed defensively across her chest.
You practically pulled my arms off, you clumsy...
Quiet. Ahira turned to the big man, who was still grinning like an idiot. Two things. First, what do you mean you know where we are? Second, why the hell didn't you mention it before? It was a character Dayton and I rolled up once. I never got a chance to use him, but he filled me in on the background, where he came from, like that. He rubbed his fists against his temples. I don't know why I didn't think of it before. It's like there's too much inside my head, too much to manage. I understand. Ahira had been wrong to give him trouble for not remembering. Things in James Michael Finnegan's life seemed like something distant. It took a bit of effort to be James Michael sometimes, to think like him. But that didn't cure his impatience. Would you please tell us what you know about Pandathaway? It could be damn important. Barak nodded, still smiling. And it's all good. Pandathaway's a port city, on the Sirik. The Sirik? It's a huge freshwater sea, sort of like one of the Great Lakes, only big... He caught himself, pointing an eager finger at the vast expanse of water spreading out over the horizon. That's the Sirik. Almost certainly. You were talking about Pandathaway? You're going to like it. Nice place. No government. Well, not much of one. The city's run by a council of guilds. A lot of them are merchants, so they like to keep the city open and safe, to keep the customers coming. Doc said that you can buy most anything there. There's a saying, Tola ergat et Pandathaway. Everything comes to Pandathaway, in Arendra. Barak shook his head, puzzled. But he didn't say it in Arendra, he said it in... It translated. Aristobulus nodded wisely. As we did. It makes sense, if you think about it. Not to me, Barak said, shrugging. But I was saying, you can get anything there. Jewels, silks, spices, slaves, horses. Lucius owns a Pandathaway-bred mare, keeps a quarter-horse's pace for a full 2 miles. Anything. He beamed. And I haven't even given you the best. Ahira returned his smile. The swordsman's enthusiasm was positively contagious. Do I have 3 guesses? No. You wouldn't guess right, anyway. In the city, right smack in the middle of the city, is the Great Library of Pandathaway. Doc said, and I quote, The Great Library of Pandathaway is to the Great Library of Alexandria as a broadsword is to a paring knife. Andrea chuckled.
You mean that it's big and awkward, no good for paring an apple?
Get off my... Shut up. Ahira couldn't help joining in the laughter. What he's trying to say is that there might be a map there to show us where the gate is. Might. If it's known, it's there. It seemed kind of strange, then, how he kept going on about it. I thought Doc was patting himself on the back. Aristobulus had been listening quietly, his lined face somber, his head cocked to one side. And there might be something else there. Something we need, badly. His gesture included both Andrea and himself. Spellbooks. Give me sufficient time, and I'll make 2 copies of... Ahira shook his head. I hope we have time for that, but we might not. I will consider nothing. Do you have any idea what it's like for a wizard to be without spellbooks? It's like being a cripple? Ahira kept his voice low as his hands balled themselves into fists at his side. I have some idea what that feels like. He forced himself to open his hands. Believe that. But tell me, how long does it take to write a spell? Just one spell, a simple one. Aristobulus shrugged, indifferent. Given the right materials and enough quiet, 10 days, perhaps? But I don't see. Precisely. You don't see. And if you don't have everything you need on hand, how long would it take? That depends, of course. For the lightning spell, the ink must contain soot from a lightning-struck tree, preferably oak, of course. And then the pen has to be made... The wizard spread his hands. But it doesn't matter. I have to have spellbooks. So does she. Ahira shook his head. Didn't the old fool see that anything, everything, had to take a back seat to getting to the gate? This world was dangerous. It had already cost the life of one of them. They had to get home.
And me? Am I going to exchange security for the ability to be a full person? Here, I'm not a cripple.
Just listen. Barak stepped between them. Let's leave this alone for the time being. We should have enough time to argue about it on our trip, no? He frowned. Ahira nodded, accepting the implied criticism. Barak was right, of course. The leader had no business getting involved in an argument, not when there were things to be done. Maybe Barak should take over. No, he hadn't acted very intelligently during the fight. An excess of bravado was bad enough in a team member.
And besides, I took on the obligation. It's mine, not his.
Correct, Barak. My fault. You haven't packed your armor, have you? Huh? What does that have to do with anything? I haven't, but I don't see what... Take off your clothes. I need your jerkin, but you can keep your leggings. You can put your armor on over your bare hide. What? Ahira smiled. I said, take your clothes off. Not a good time to bring it up, but he didn't want Barak musing on the leader's shortcomings. Best to keep him off guard. He sobered. I don't intend to make a habit of explaining myself, but what do you think the chances are that they're looking for Hakim down there? A big man, dressed only in pants, no shirt? That can't be too common around here. Not from what we've seen and heard of the locals. So we make sure he isn't dressed only in pants. Go for more standard clothing. You're the only one bigger than he is, so you get to provide the clothes. Ahira extended a palm. It'll be a bit scratchy for you. The inside of boiled leather isn't too smooth, but that's the way it goes. He tapped a thumb against his axe. Come to think of it, give me your leggings, too. You can switch pants with him. They won't look so loose on you. Now? Here? Now. Aristobulus snickered. Andrea giggled. Glaring at all three of them, Barak began unlacing the front of his jerkin. Then he shook his head. He chuckled. You little bastard. Right. Ahira returned his smile. But hurry up. I want another chance to talk to Hakim before we get going. The sooner I get finished with that, the less time you have to wander around in your bare skin. Ahira seated himself in front of Doria and Hakim, dropping the pile of clothing to the grass. He jerked his head at Doria. Go put your pack on. We're leaving in a few minutes. She nodded and walked away, shaking her head when she got behind Hakim. Clearly, she hadn't gotten anywhere with him. He was sitting against one of the now empty boxes, running stiff fingers over the thin pink scar that was all that remained of his wound, staring blankly off into space. I want you to put those clothes on before we leave. You can give your trousers to Barak, and you'd better stash your scimitar in your pack. I'll give you my crossbow so you don't feel naked. Fine. He made no move to pick up the jerkin and leggings. He just sat there, rubbing the small scar as though he were trying to rub it away. And you'll be glad to know that Barak knows quite a lot about Pandathaway. Sounds like a nice place. Ahira crabbed himself sideways into Hakim's line of sight. No lords. That's nice. The best thing to do would be to try, gently, to get him to talk it out. But there just wasn't time. The area around Lundale was probably not a healthy place for any of them. The graves of the dead soldiers were shallow and nearby. It was only a matter of time until the bodies were discovered, and that would be one hell of a problem. Quite possibly a fatal one. They could all end up like Jason Parker.
But why don't I feel anything for Jason? Granted, I never liked him, but I should feel something for him. Now that he's dead.
Ahira shook his head. Introspection could come later. For now, he had to get Hakim up and moving.
One more try the nice way.
I thought I could count on you. You disappointed me. The thief's head snapped up. What? How the hell was I supposed to know that he was going to pick Lund's pouch, get himself killed? You told him not to take chances. I told him not to. Good. Anger was better than shocked numbness. That's not what I mean. We've got to get going. But you're just sitting there, feeling sorry for yourself. I expected better of you. Hakim spat. What do you know about it? You ever have to run a few miles with a knife in you? A bunch of people behind you wanting your goddamn blood? No. Akira shrugged, then started to rise. I had better go give Doria a talking to. Looks to me like she did a pretty poor job of healing you, if it still hurts you like this. Wait. Hakim held up a palm. Akira lowered himself back to the grass. It's not that. The time I played in the game against Cornell, the time I played a half with a torn triceps. I remember. He nodded. That must have hurt almost as much as this did. It hurt more. But that was different. We won that time. We won this time. But I didn't. Hakim slammed a fist against the ground. I was supposed to get back intact. With Jason, with information. 1 out of 3 isn't bad, considering the situation. You don't understand, do you? I've never failed at anything before. I'm big, I'm strong, and I'm smart. I've always just assumed that was enough. This time it wasn't. His eyes bored into Ahira's, as though daring him to deny it. If you and Carl had been just a few seconds slower, I'd be dead. Like Jason. He shuddered. God, James, you should have heard him screaming. I could have been next. I was lucky.
And you're terrified that you won't be lucky next time. I don't blame you for that.
Once he had envied Walter Slovotsky. His attitude, his perfect faith and complete confidence that he was firmly at the center of the universe, and that all was well with him and his universe. That didn't seem so enviable. Not now. A self-image cast in stone could shatter. Of course, I never failed at anything. That was easy, as long as you didn't run into a situation you couldn't handle. That was fine, until you had to stagger down a road, armed men chasing you, knowing that if you fall, you die. But when that self-image shatters, where do you go from there? He clapped a hand to the thief's shoulder. I don't know about next time. No promises. He shrugged. But I'll be there, if you need me. He rose to his feet. And for right now, I need you to get back on top of things. We had better get down to Lundport and book passage the hell out of here. There could be trouble if anyone recognizes you. On top of that, Barak is giving speeches when he should be fighting, Aristobulus is objecting to anything and everything, Doria can't get her spells back, and I'm waiting for Andrea to give me a problem. So far, she's the only one who hasn't. He held out a hand. So, I need your help. Hakim sat motionless, then nodded weakly. I'll do my best. I can't promise that it'll be good enough. He accepted the hand and let the dwarf pull him to his feet. Welcome to the real world. Ahira found himself smiling. Almost. Now, get the hell out of your clothes and into Carl's. He raised his voice. Everybody, we're moving out. Aristobulus, standing sweatily in his robes, bent to lower his rucksack to the sun-heated wood of the pier. There was no need to keep it on his back while Ahira and Hakim negotiated with Aver Gannis, captain of the Gannis's Pride. It looked to be a long bargaining session, and Aristobulus's muscles were already complaining from the strain. He rubbed a fist against the small of his back and closed his eyes, trying to ignore the constant babble from merchants arguing over the price of grain, the squawking of the gulls overhead, the foul stench of rotting fish. Eyes closed, he could see his own power wrapped around him, a strong crimson aura that warmed him, and pleasantly, despite the heat of the day. He raised his hand in front of his face, working his fingers, enjoying the way the redness outlined his unseen hand, even as it moved. It was magic, of course, which meant that it was good, and which meant that it was power, something Lou Ricchetti had always wanted but never known. Off to his side, another source blazed, but less intensely, much less so. Andrea simply wasn't in his league. Was that just because her character had been of a lower class than his? Or was it that she just hadn't wanted this as badly as he had? He shrugged. It really didn't matter. The only thing that did matter was that he had been reprieved by Dayton. Life had condemned Lou Ricchetti to be an inconsequential little man. At best, a second-rate civil engineer in an age when damn close to nothing important was being built. No more great suspension bridges to span mighty rivers. Few, if any, dams. The future of American engineering was in electronics, diddling with little circuit diagrams, not building things, not making magic. And if you couldn't make magic with stone and steel, all that was left was to dream about real magic. All that had been left. He let his remaining spells cycle through his brain, making sure each one was ready and complete. Not that that was necessary. An incomplete spell wouldn't make his mind pulse, wouldn't push at him night and day to release it, as though it were some sort of huge sneeze backed up in his nostrils. He could live with that, easily, in exchange for the power. He could even live with the knowledge of his best friend's death, his only friend's death. Probably he should be mourning Jason. Perhaps Lou Ricchetti would be going over all his contacts with Jason, dredging up pleasure and pain from their friendship, regretting that Jason was gone. But he couldn't do it. Not with his power wrapping him, keeping him warm. The death of one powerless human just didn't seem significant. Now, the loss of the spellbooks, that hurt. Which makes me a small person, perhaps? If that was so, then so be it.
Are you falling asleep? Andrea asked, nudging him. Standing up?
He opened his eyes regretfully, the warm glow of his power overwhelmed by the bright sunlight. No?
Well, Ahira says to keep an eye out for anybody who looks official. Since the soldiers chasing Hakim didn't come back, the locals may be looking for him. And I don't think that would be very healthy for the rest of us.
Very well. Although Aristobulus didn't see why he had to be the lookout. Probably there was something interesting going on at the boat. Keeping an eye on the shoreside crowd, he moved closer to where Hakim was haggling with the captain. Averganus tapped bare toes on the wood, his heavy calluses clicking like dice. Well then, make up your mind. It hardly matters to me. I can make a profit of 5, perhaps 6 gold by carrying good Landes wine instead of you. He spoke Arendra in a pleasant rhythm, his R's rolling melodiously. Huge shoulders shrugged inside his sweat-stained sailcloth tunic, belted at the waist with a length of rope. The tunic stopped abruptly at mid-thigh. Below, his thick legs projected like tree stumps. Hakim smiled, raising an eyebrow. There would be advantages to carrying us instead. Ganas nodded. That is so. He sighed. I do have this problem. Happens to many a man my age. It would cost me much to have it cured in Pandathaway. Perhaps even more than your passages will cost me, all things considered. But only perhaps. Problem? He looked healthy enough. That wasn't what I meant. Hakim gestured at the crewmen swarming around the sloop, checking lines, stowing cargo, pausing occasionally to leer at Doria and Andrea. I have been watching the way they check their bows, their arrows. There are a few spots on deck that don't have a weapon within reach. You are concerned about pirates, no? Not concerned, properly cautious. I've sailed the Cyric for 40 years, man and boy. Only run into pirates 7, 8 times. He grinned, a gap-toothed smile that was not at all friendly. And I have managed to give a good account of myself those few times. He tossed his head, his waist-length pigtail curling around his torso like a snake. So I have no need of wizards or warriors to protect me. But... He extended his arm towards Doria, frowning as Hakim moved between them. I do require a cleric's help. His face went blank. But that can wait until we dock in Pandathaway. I won't have any use for it until then. I don't bugger my seamen. He smiled at Doria. Well, that explained what his problem was. A case of impotence, eh? And just perhaps Averganus was a bit more eager to have her cure it than he appeared to be. Otherwise, he might well have set his price for passage at enough money to overcompensate the loss of cargo space. Aristobulus nodded to himself. Yes, that made sense. But best to whisper it quietly to Ahira or Hakim, rather than confront Ganas. The trouble with most people was that they weren't rational. The captain might refuse to carry them just out of stubbornness. He took a few steps closer and called to the dwarf. "What is it?" Ahira snapped. "We're talking here, and I thought you were told to—" He cut himself off, his eyes going wide, as he looked past Aristobulus' shoulder. The wizard turned. A troop of 10, no, 12 soldiers were working their way toward the pier, stopping and questioning passer-by as they came. He moved toward the end of the pier, trying to carry his rucksack casually. "We had best conclude this quickly, no?" he said, careful to speak in English rather than Arendra. Ahira turned to the thief. "Hakim?" Hakim shrugged in the loose tunic. "I don't think they'll recognize me. Not unless— Cancel that. The one with the longbow is Merrick. He'll know me, if he sees me. Maybe. Then turn around." Ganas frowned. "What tongue was that?" Barak took a step toward him, smiling faintly. "I don't think that's any of your concern, is it?" He switched to English. "Better agree to something, folks. Other than her heal disease spell, the only decent one she's got left is for minor wounds. And she's only got one of those left. If we get in a fight—" Doria spoke up. "I don't remember anyone asking me if I wanted to cure him, and then prove that I have." Aristobulus sneaked a glance over his shoulder. The soldiers were still working their way toward the end of the pier, where the Ganas's pride was tied up. But unless the one that knew Hakim recognized him at a distance, they still had a few minutes. The soldiers were a few hundred yards away on the crowded pier. Barak shrugged. "I don't see what your problem is. After all, you've always been willing to make it with practically any—" Her hand struck Barak's face with a loud whack. It probably wasn't the force of the blow that staggered him. It was the surprise. Aristobulus sighed. It was starting to look like he'd have to waste a spell or two. "The stupid, over-muscled, under-brained—" "That is it," Ahira snapped, then switched back to Arendra as he turned to Ganes. "We have been trying to reach an accommodation with you, Captain, but clearly you're unwilling to talk business." And in English, "I'm a lot of things, but I'm not a pimp. Hakim, keep your head turned away. Everybody, up packs and move quietly down the pier. And I do mean quietly." He fiddled with the straps holding his battle-axe to his chest. "We just might be able to get out of this without—" Doria raised a palm as she shot a look back at the approaching soldiers.
"Wait, I agree to your terms of Air Ganes," she said in Arendra to the captain. "Free passage for all, in return for—
"Agreed." Ganes smiled gently, then spoke to the others. "Your cabins are forward, below decks. A bit cramped, perhaps, but I do keep a clean ship. And my cook is of the best. I bought him in Pandathaway." Ganes vaulted over the railing, landing lightly on the deck. "And you, lady, I will see in my cabin, as soon as we clear the harbor." He ran blunt fingers across his stubbled cheeks. "And I shave myself. I'll be gentle, I swear." He smiled. "You might even enjoy it." Her knuckles whitened as she clutched the railing.
"This is a business affair, Ganes, and I'm only agreeing for reasons—"
"That are nobody else's concern," Ahira interrupted. "Captain, you were about to show us to our cabins?"
"That's him!"
a rough voice shouted from down the pier. The 12 soldiers broke into a trot. Aristobulus sucked air into his lungs.
"I'll slow them down, yes?"
Ahira nodded, unstrapping his axe. "Everybody else, get on board. Captain, you're about to be in the same trouble we are if you don't get this ship moving quickly." Idly, he tore through the leather strap that slung his crossbow across his shoulders and tossed the bow and his quiver to Hakim. "Use it." Ganes stood motionless for a long moment, then shrugged. "It seems I have little choice. All hands, cast off!" Aristobulus turned, raising his arms. "Now let the power flow." It would have to be the flame spell. Nothing else would slow down the charging soldiers. "So I'll give you fire." He let the spell click to the forefront of his mind, his chest tightening, straining as though he had drawn in twice as much air as his lungs could handle. The red glow brightened, a hot envelope enshrouding him, tingling his skin, so intense it blanketed his vision. And the urgency grew. The spell had been pushing constantly at the back of his mind, but pushing gently. Now it roared, demanding use, painfully growing in his skull until he thought his head would explode from the pressure and heat. Aristobulus released it. the rush of sound so loud he couldn't begin to hear or understand the words issuing from his own mouth. The charging soldiers were a scant 100 feet away. Halfway between the two men at the head of the group, the pier exploded into fire. The wood glowed with white heat for a moment before it could start to flame. The wall of fire grew, tongues of flame licking easily 200 feet into the sky, roaring, crackling. Aristobulus dropped his hands. It was done. "You stupid!" Ahira grabbed the collar of his robes. The pier dropped away under his feet as the dwarf threw him over the rail. He landed on his shoulder on the deck of the Gannis's Pride, sliding until he banged into a mast. Pain lanced through him. He staggered to his feet. And then he understood. He had cast the spell too far away. The lead soldiers had been able to get past the wall of fire before it blocked the way for the rest. Ahira waited for them, his battle-axe held easily in his hands. "Cast off, damn you all!" Gannis shouted at his crew, following his own orders as he raced to the front of the boat to slash through the bow line. "Get those sails up! A hard hand on the tiller there!" The first soldier glanced at the boat as seamen pushed it away from the pier, then moved towards the dwarf, only his outline visible against the wall of fire. Aristobulus had known that the dwarf was strong, but he had never realized just how strong. Ahira ducked under the swing of the soldier's sword, planted the stock of his axe against the man's chest, and pushed. The soldiers tumbled back, head over heels, a full 50 feet into the leading edge of the fire. He jerked to his feet, gibbering and flaming, and twitched himself over the side of the pier, splashing into the water. Ahira turned to the other soldier. A crossbow bolt spanged into the pier at Ahira's feet. Aristobulus turned to see Hakim, swearing, pull back the bowstring, then reach for another bolt. The dwarf moved smoothly toward the remaining soldier, feinted with the blade of his axe, caught the soldier's sword thrust on the haft of his axe, and swung, once. Once was more than enough. The soldier, chain-link armor and all, dropped to the pier, his torso twitching itself a few feet away from his legs before it stopped. Ahira had sliced the man neatly in half. Raising his bloody axe over his head, Ahira threw it at Aristobulus. It thunked into the deck beside him, only a yard from his sandaled feet. The dwarf took a running start and jumped across the 10 feet separating the boat and the pier. "Not too bad, though," he smiled. "Captain, let's get out of here." Gannis swore under his breath as he bounded across the deck to the tiller. And that brings us to the end of Chapter 6. In just a few short hours, our party of impromptu seekers has found out just how real this fantasy world is, to the cost of one of their lives. More and more, the minds of their characters impose upon them, blurring the lines between who they were and who they are. Now they are on board ship to Pandathway, safe at last, if anywhere in this world can ever really be safe for them. Thank you for listening. I greatly appreciate it. If anyone has any comments or suggestions for how I can improve the quality of these recordings, I would welcome the feedback. Hopefully in the future I can continue to get better at both reading and editing them. Thank you again, and have a good night.